extra special edition because you get to hear me with a hoarse sounding voice because I am just getting over a cold. I'm also going to throw a shout out to Anupa Phillips, who I hope is listening to this webinar right now. She's a brand new member of my team and she hasn't gotten to listen to this awesome educational presentation that we're about to do yet. So I hope you enjoy it. Anupa, for everyone else, I'm going to get started, okay? It's 12 o'clock. As people join in, feel free to throw your questions into the chat. I'll be happy to try to answer them. I will try to answer them in real time as best I can, although sometimes I may get carried away and ignore them for a few minutes, but I will come back to it and I will keep doing my best to answer all your questions. I know we're scheduled to run till 1 o'clock, but I will hang around as long as people want to keep asking me questions. So feel free to do that. But also, don't wait. If something comes up and you want to ask a question, throw it in the chat, and we'll do our best to see if we can get going and get it taken care of right away. So without further ado, protecting yourself and your team, coverage essentials for businesses, hosted by the Workers' Compensation Board. We're going to introduce the Workers' Compensation Board. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the agency, what we do here, and myself and my team and what we do specifically within the board. Then I'm going to go into coverage basics, right? We'll talk about the 3 types of insurance coverage most business owners in New York are required to have if they have employees, right? We'll get into the specifics of who needs the coverage and who doesn't need the coverage. And that's where we're going to get into some of the more interesting questions that people have, such as what do we do about independent contractors, things like that. Then we'll talk about costs. There's really 2 types of costs that we get into when we're talking about insurance here. The cost of the insurance, the premiums that you will pay to have the insurance policies, as well as the penalties you will pay if you don't get the insurance you're supposed to have. We'll get into controlling costs. We'll talk a little about safety and other things that you can do as a business owner to protect yourself and keep costs down with your workers' compensation insurance. Finally, the last section, we will do a quick run through of what to do when there is an injury, who was responsible for what, and how that process goes. And then we'll wrap up. So let's get into it. Introduction. What is the Workers' Compensation Board? The board was created in 1914 after the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire of 1911, which was really the catalyst that pushed a number of labor reforms in New York State, as well as other places in the U.S. One of those reforms was the creation of the Workers' Compensation Board here in New York. We have responsible for overseeing the system of the workers' compensation insurance, the disability benefits, and New York State's paid family leave. Right, so we oversee this particular systems, insurance coverage systems. We don't sell you the insurance. I need to make that very clear. The Workers' Compensation Board does not sell insurance. We are the regulator, the overseer of this particular market and this particular system. We get reports from the insurance carriers, who most people buy their insurance from, as well as medical providers and others, in order to make sure that everyone is following the law and doing their part to execute and take care of people the way that we're supposed to be doing. The agency has over 1,000 employees. The vast majority of the work that takes place at the Workers' Compensation Board is the adjudication of claims. So the way the workers' compensation system works is business owners have workers' compensation insurance to protect their workers. If a worker gets hurt or sick on the job, they file a claim, they go to the doctor. The doctor will send the bill to the insurance carrier. The insurance carrier should pay the bill. And then the worker should get better and hopefully return to work. If they need to be out for a little while, there's also an indemnity or a wage replacement that will help them get back on their feet. But if all goes well, they get back on their feet and they come back to work eventually. But often there are disputes in the system. Sometimes there are controversies. Sometimes there are questions about whether or not an accident or an injury really did occur at the workplace. And so every workers' compensation claim needs to be reviewed and go in front of a judge who ultimately makes an award. And that is the vast majority of the work at the Workers' Compensation Board, is the adjudication of those claims, of making sure all the necessary information is collected and prepared and placed in front of a judge who can then make a decision on the award. So that's basically what we do for the most part. Within the agency, though, there are some very special units, such as my unit, the Advocate for Business unit. I am the Advocate for Business. My name is Anthony Tomaselli, and I have a team of dedicated professionals who work with me, and we assist individual businesses with coverage and compliance problems. We do this in two ways. We have people who are calling us and sending us emails every day with questions, concerns, and issues. We try our best to answer them as quickly as possible and get people to the result as fast as we possibly can, driving for a better outcome in most cases. Often, though, our calls and emails come after you have gotten into trouble, such as a penalty for noncompliance. Of course, we're going to do our best to help you, but what we really like to do is get in front of those problems and issues and do this. So, this is a monthly webinar hosted here at the Workers' Compensation Board, but I will also come out. I will come to your professional associations. I will come to your Chamber of Commerce. If there are any other events or activities if you know of where there are business owners who could benefit from learning what I'm about to tell you before they get into trouble, please let us know because we try to get out. Yes, we do this webinar once a month, but we do many, many other presentations, webinars, and activities all across New York State all the time because we want to make sure you, as business owners here in New York State, know what you need to know in order to comply with the system, protect your people, and stay out of trouble. I do have the luxury of reporting directly to the chair of the Workers' Compensation Board, myself and my fellow advocate. I also need to mention there is an advocate for injured workers at the Workers' Compensation Board as well. So if you know any workers who are having a difficult time with their claim and they need help, we do have a person in a similar role to mine who is there to assist them. And both the advocate for injured workers and me, the advocate for business, we report directly to the chair, and that is by design so that the feedback and what we hear and learn from interacting with you, the stakeholders, goes directly to the top of the agency and gets heard without getting lost in the bureaucracy. We really do care about you. Governor Hochul really cares about you. We want to do the best job we can for New York State. We're trying, and people like myself and the advocate for injured workers, we are out here to try our best to help you and also, very important, hear from you, get feedback from you so that we can try to make our agencies work better. So let's get into the details, the coverage basics. Workers' compensation insurance, that's the big one. That's the one that's in our name, Workers' Compensation Board, Workers' Compensation Insurance. Workers' compensation insurance is to cover on-the-job accidents, injuries, and illnesses. So this is if somebody gets hurt or sick at work while they're working. All right, the workers' compensation insurance kicks in, provides medical, covers the full cost of the necessary medical treatment, and it also provides a wage replacement, which currently sits at 2/3 of your average weekly wage, capped out at 2/3 of the average weekly wage in New York. That's the maximum. So right now it's close to about $1,200 a week is the maximum benefit. However, if you're out of work because you're hurt or sick, that's very important. It's going to help you keep food on the table, keep the lights on. All right, this is in the best interest of both employers and employees because it is a no-fault system. Right, the insurance steps in, takes responsibility, takes care of the worker. The worker is able to go to the doctor because there is insurance there to pay for and take care of them. The employers who spend time and energy investing in their workers, they get their workers taken care of. They don't have to worry about, oh my gosh, are we going to be able to take care of this person? The workers' compensation insurance is there to take care of them and get them back on their feet to return to work. In the dark days before the Triangle Fire, before we had a workers' compensation board, the only thing a worker could do if they got hurt or sick on the job and they wanted some kind of compensation is sue their employer, and that is not something that any of you would want to experience. So that's the design of this system, and it really is meant to help both the employers and the employees. So over the years, we've expanded. We've taken some responsibility for other types of insurance coverages as well. I mentioned the disability insurance and the paid family leave. Well, the disability insurance is there if someone gets hurt or sick off the job. They're not at work, but they get hurt or sick and now they can't go to work. All right, so disability insurance is there to kind of help those people keep the lights on, keep a roof over their head, keep food on the table while they recover. Right, this is only a limited wage replacement with the disability insurance. The presumption is that there is some other kind of insurance that would take care of the medical costs, such as the person's health insurance or if it was an accident, the liability insurance of whoever caused the accident, something like that. So the disability benefits is just a wage replacement, no medical with it. The claim must be filed within 30 days of the illness or injury that's incapacitating the worker and preventing them from going to work. And the benefit is a wage replacement of up to $170 a week for up to 26 weeks. And yes, I know that looks like a small number. It is a small number. It hasn't been increased since 1989, but it's still something, right? If a person can't go to work and can't get out of the house, can't do what they got to do, every little bit helps when you're trying to feed your family and keep a roof over your head. So that's the disability benefits insurance. Finally, the most recent addition to our portfolio, 2018, we started implementing the New York State paid family leave, most robust paid family leave in the country. Paid family leave is so that workers can bond with new children, whether it's birth, adoption, foster care, all are eligible. If you have a sick family member, if the worker's got a sick family member who needs care, whether it's inpatient or outpatient, but under the supervision of a medical professional, you can use the paid family leave to take job protected paid time off to take care of them. Same thing if you have a military family member who is activated, deployed, or otherwise taken away from their family, creating a hardship situation where somebody in your family needs help because of a military stress. Paid family leave can also be used for that as well. What is the benefit of the paid family leave? So you can get up to 12 weeks of paid family leave, right? At 67%, it's like similar to with the workers' comps, 2/3 of the average weekly wage. Employees' average weekly wage is based on their last 8 weeks of pay prior to taking the paid family leave, which in 2026, New York State average weekly wage is $1,833. So the maximum you can get is 2/3 of that, which, as I mentioned before, it's just like with the workers' comp, it's about $1,200 a month, is the most you can receive. Employees can take the benefit all at once or intermittently, but paid family leave must always be done in full day increments. You can't take like an hour or two of paid family leave in the morning or in the afternoon. It's got to be the whole day, one day at a time, complete days. So who's eligible for the paid family leave, right? People ask a lot of questions. There's some flexibility with the part-time and short duration workers that can exempt folks from both the disability and the paid family leave occasionally. With the paid family leave, employees who work a full-time schedule of 20 more hours a week are eligible once they've completed 26 consecutive weeks of employment. Part-time workers who work less than 20 hours a week are eligible after working for their employer for 175 days. Okay, and those days don't need to be consecutive. So that's really kind of, the reason we have these requirements for the paid family leave is we don't necessarily expect employers to come up with paid family leave for like very, very short duration workers, such as like a week of work or just a couple of hours of work here and there. Um, I also need to note that just as with the workers' compensation and the disability insurance, citizenship or immigration status is not a factor in eligibility for New York State paid family leave. We don't ask questions about that. We just want to know, are you going to work in New York State? And if you are going to work for an employer in New York State, you need to be covered for these benefits if you meet this criteria. So we get a lot of questions, right? Some people say, I don't have any kids. I'm not planning to have any kids. I don't have any family members I like that much. I'm never going to use this benefit. Do I have to have it? Yes. Paid family leave coverage is not optional for most employees in New York State. Like I mentioned, some part-time or seasonal employees may be eligible to not get the coverage and get the waiver. But as I said, if you work fewer than 20 hours a week and won't work 175 days in a year, or if the worker works 20 or more hours a week but will not be in employment with you for 26 consecutive weeks, then they can get a waiver on the paid family leave. Those waivers will be revoked automatically if the employee's schedule changes that they no longer qualify for the waiver. So you don't have to worry about doing anything on your end. Once the employee goes over the limits, the paid family leave contributions should start coming out along with any retroactive amounts due. People ask me questions about paid family leave and FMLA. What is the difference? Okay, they're both available to take leave, to take time, paid job protected time off for bonding with a child, caring with a sick family member, helping family members when they're dealing with a military deployment. You are eligible to continue getting health insurance under your continued terms during the time that you're out under both paid family leave and FMLA. But there are quite a number of significant differences. I'm not going to go through this whole slide right now. It's in here as a reference. You're all going to be able to get this presentation slides after the fact, and you can use this as a reference. Most important thing to remember with paid family leave and FMLA, paid family leave is an insurance policy. It pays. There's money that's paid out to the workers while they're using paid family leave. FMLA is not. FMLA is a federal law that requires job protection. All right. And it really only applies to workers who work for companies that have 50 or more employees, right? Whereas New York State paid family leave is required for anybody that has any employees that meet the criteria that I described before. So if anybody wants to dig into this further, we certainly can, but on a very, very high level, we're talking about pay versus unpaid. Paid family leave is a New York State thing. FMLA is a federal law, Family Medical Leave Act, federal law that just basically gives job protection. There's no monetary benefits going out. One last thing I should mention about the FMLA and the paid family leave is FMLA, you could take FMLA for yourself, right? If you get sick, you could take FMLA and stay out and you could take a quite a significant amount of time off, but you're not going to get any pay for it. Whereas with the paid family leave, you can't use it for yourself. It's only like if you add a child or you have a sick family member. If you are sick or you are in trouble in New York State, you would go to the workers' compensation insurance or the disability insurance. The paid family leave, again, is for your family members. So this is just a recap. I kind of mentioned these numbers earlier. I'm going to go through them again. Maximum weekly benefit has gone up from last year to this year, right? So we're at $1,228.53, right? That's that number that I was getting at before when I said 2/3 of the average weekly wage. That's what 2/3 of the New York State average weekly wage looks like. The contribution rate for paid family leave is also now increased to 0.432% of gross wages, capped at an annual maximum of $411.91. This is $57 more than last year. All right. Now, I'm also going to mention that I'm going to mention this again later. Paid family leave comes out of the worker's pay. The worker is going to pay for the paid family leave themselves. You just need to make sure you have the policy in place and you set up the deductions to take that money from them in order to pay for this policy. And that number that you see on the screen, $411.91, is the maximum amount of money that any worker can pay in a year towards paid family leave. All right, so let's mention this paid family leave website. Very good website, a lot of great information on there. If you want to know more about paid family leave, visit paidfamilyleave.ny.gov/2026. Ton of information on there. A lot of people are still treating paid family leave like it's a brand new thing, even though we're going on 7 or 8 years now. But hey, not everybody's staying on top of these things. Not everybody was hiring workers a few years ago. So, sometimes it's good to brush up, get some information. If you need additional assistance beyond the website, that is the helpline right there, 844-337-6303. We have an attorney of the day on call every day here at the Workers' Compensation Board just to answer paid family leave questions. Paid family leave attorney of the day. That's the helpline right there. So if you need any assistance, you can call that helpline. And of course, you can reach out directly to me or my team, and we can connect you with them if you need to do that. So let's move into the next section. Who needs the coverage? Businesses with employees need coverage. Workers' compensation needs to be in place on day one. Before any worker shows up on the job site, the insurance policy needs to be in place. With disability and paid family leave, going back to the criteria that I was describing before, we don't start holding you, employers, accountable for having disability and paid family leave until 4 weeks after the 30th day of employment. That's when we're going to start looking. And if you have any eligible employees, you really need to have it by then. So really, if you're thinking about hiring people long term, you're going to want to get in touch with some insurance professionals and get both of these things squared away before you even hire those workers, just so you don't have to worry about this later. All right. I'm just going to take a look here. It looks like somebody wrote a really long question into the chat here about paid family leave benefits. Um, Tony, I'm going to put this to you to this. This looks a little bit complicated, so why don't you send this to me in an email? It looks personal. What I do usually say is with the questions that you submit into the chat during these webinars, if you have a question that's going to involve some of your personal information, your personal situation, and it's not like a broad-based question, the best thing to do is to send us an email outside of the webinar, and we can talk to you one-on-one, have a conversation, and not necessarily get into the details here on the webinar. So shoot me that email, Tony, and we'll get to you. All right, so anyway, I'm just going to go back to the slides here. I said businesses with employees need coverage. You're going to want to know the definition of employee, right? Who are these employees? Anyone providing any services to a for-profit business can be determined to be an employee of that business, right? Anyone. Doesn't matter if they're getting paid or not. They could be volunteering. But if they're providing services to a for-profit business, that business is responsible for their health and safety, all right? Family members as well. The only exception in New York State for family members not being required to have coverage is if you are the child of a family-owned farmer and you're working on your family-owned farm. You do not need to have coverage, but that's only your family's farm, right? So if you're a farmer and you own the farm and you have kids, you can put them to work and not cover them for workers' compensation on your own farm. But they cannot go work on someone else's farm, and you can't take someone else's kids to work on your farm unless obviously they're old enough to legally work and you get the workers' compensation insurance. With not-for-profits, it's a little bit different. Compensation is more important. We're really looking at the people who are getting paid to work for the not-for-profits because not-for-profits depend heavily on volunteers, so they don't need to cover their volunteers. They just need to cover the paid employees. However, there are even exceptions to that, such as clergy or teachers in a 501c3. They do not need to have coverage. So if you're operating a Sunday school, your Sunday school teachers don't need to have coverage. With not-for-profits, I would definitely urge you to reach out to us for a follow-up conversation if you want to get into this, because there are some nuance and some specific situations and scenarios that apply for not-for-profits that we'd definitely be happy to talk to you about. So we just told you who needs to have workers' compensation coverage. Let's talk about who doesn't need to have workers' compensation coverage. Sole proprietors with no employees, partners in a partnership with no employees, one or two person-owned corporations with no employees, right? That's very important. Now, this is the law. I don't write the laws. But if you have a corporation and there's only one or two people on the corporation, there's no one else working in the corporation, you don't need to have coverage. But specifically with corporations, if you add a third owner, if your corporation has three owners, again, I don't write the laws, I just tell you how to follow them. If your corporation has three owners, somebody's going to need coverage. Somebody's going to have coverage. There's going to need to be a policy there. Unless we do have the LLCs here in New York. New York is an LLC state. If you are an LLC and the only people getting compensated are members or owners of the LLC, you don't need to have coverage, and there is no limit on number of owners. You can have 3, 4, 5 owners of your LLC, and they don't need to have coverage. So what's the theme here? There's a theme here if you're paying close attention. If you are the owner of the business, whether you're one person owner or you're partner in a partnership, if you're the owner of the business, in most cases, your own health and safety is your responsibility. You don't have to have insurance. You could take the risk and say, if I get hurt or if I get sick running my business, I will figure out how to pay the doctor bills. I will figure out how to keep the roof over my head. You can definitely do that. However, once you bring people on to start working for you and they start helping your business, they can't take that risk and you can't take that risk for them. You have to get the coverage. Now, I get a lot of questions about disability insurance paid family leave. Can I get it if I want it, right? So you may not be eligible. And actually, I keep saying I need to change this slide to say workers' compensation as well. Because all three of these products, workers' compensation, disability insurance, paid family, they're products. You can go out there and buy them in the marketplace. So just because I'm telling you the law doesn't require you to have workers' compensation or disability or paid family leave, that doesn't mean that you can't go out and buy it if you want it. And you may want it, right? You may be thinking about adding some child to your family. You may have an elderly parent or someone else in your family who really needs a lot of care, and you're going to think you're going to need these benefits. So go out and get them. Same thing with the workers' comp. If you don't think you can afford an accident or an injury, you think if you get hurt, you're not going to be able to go to work and do your job, and you're not going to be able to pay the bills, then maybe you should get a workers' comp policy and cover yourself. What's up here on this slide, what's important to note here is that with the paid family leave, you have to opt in within the first 26 weeks of starting your business. And then if you do that, you can take a claim right away. If you can have a baby right away and file a paid family leave claim and take the time off. But if you don't opt in within the first 26 weeks of business, you have to wait 2 full years before you can file a claim, right? So if you've been in business for a couple of years and you decide, hey, you know what? I want to have a baby. I want to get paid family leave. You can do it, but you're going to have to wait 2 years before you file a claim. So that's what this is all about. It's really kind of get away from people who are just thinking like these, oh, I'm not going to need it, I'm never going to use it, and then, oh my gosh, I'm having a baby, I better get some paid family leave. Like you have to already be paying into the policy. So that's an important note with the paid family leave if you're an owner and you want to get it for yourself. All right, let's move into a always a controversial topic, independent contractors. Independent contractors. So what about them? Who needs to cover them? Do they need coverage? Right? A lot of people use the independent contractor model because they're trying to avoid paying for things like workers' compensation coverage. That's why it's very important that you listen to what I'm about to say. The 1099 form, right? IRS document 1099 form. That is just a form with a number on it to the Workers' Compensation Board. That is for tax purposes, has nothing to do with us. For the Workers' Compensation Board, we want to know about the actual relationship between the person who is doing the work and the person who is paying for the work to be done. So we're going to ask a whole bunch of questions. If you go to our website, under the employer section, there's a whole long list of questions that a workers' compensation law judge would ask to determine whether or not somebody was an independent contractor. Here's 3 examples right up here on the screen, and I'll run through them really quick just so you can get at what we're looking at here. So most important is this concept of direction and control. Who's deciding what has to be done, how it has to be done, and when it has to be done? So we're going to be asking the question, does the hiring business control the time and manner in which the work is to be done? Then we get into things like, does the business have an employer identification number? Right? Do they file their own business tax returns? Do they maintain their own business establishment? Right? Important things. Do they advertise their services to other customers? Do they work for other businesses? Right? Have they signed a non-compete clause? Like these are all the kinds of questions that we'd be looking at to try to figure out, is this person actually independent? Is this worker really independent from the person paying for the job? So very, very important to just don't take it for granted that because you filled out a 1099 form that would, oh, sure, that's an independent contractor. No, there's a lot more nuance to it than that. We really want to make sure that the people who are responsible for the workers are actually taking responsibility for them. We have some specific considerations with construction workers. All right, we know construction is an area where overuse of the independent contractor designation is prevalent, right? And I don't want to use the word fraud, but it's out there. Construction, I should also say we have a similar piece of information of legislation for commercial trucking. It's called the Commercial Goods Transportation Fair Play Act. That's another area where we see abuse of the independent contractors. So whenever we're talking to somebody on a construction site who's been hurt or has filed a claim, the same thing with the driver of a truck, we are really going to look carefully if it's construction or if it's trucking. Because what we're going to do is we're going to assume that unless it can be proved that this person has their own business, we're going to find one of the other businesses on the job site or involved in the trucking operation and hold them accountable. This is the Construction Industry Fair Play Act. If you want more information, you can go to the Department of Labor's website. They got a whole page about it. But this is basically just to say that we are going to assume that you are a worker of one of the other businesses on site. We're not just going to, you can't just say like, oh, that person is an independent contractor. We don't have to worry about them. We are going to investigate. We do want to make sure people get taken care of as appropriate. Another consideration with contractors construction is here in New York State. General contractors are liable for the workers' compensation claims of any uninsured subcontractors. So if you're a general contractor and you work with a lot of subs, it's in your best interest to make sure they have insurance, because if they don't, you're going to be responsible for any of their workers if they get hurt or sick on one of your projects. What we recommend you do in this situation is have your subcontractors add you as a certificate holder on their New York State workers' compensation insurance policy. If you're a certificate holder, you will get any updates or changes. You'll be notified of any updates or changes to the policy. You'll also be able to request copies of that certificate directly from the insurance carrier without having to go through your subcontractor. That's important when you're trying to provide information to agencies when you're bidding on contracts, or towns for permits and they want those certificates of insurance. You can go right to the carrier and get it yourself. And then that information about the notifications is because real world things happen. You might today go check out your subcontractor, and we have a tool that can help you with this. Workers' Compensation Board website has a tool. Does my employer have coverage? So if you go to our website, wcb.my.gov, you can use that tool to look up your employer, any business that you want to work with, and see if they have insurance. So let's say like this week, you're doing your due diligence, you're checking out your subcontractor, they have the insurance they're supposed to have, you see it on the website, good, you hire them. But next week they forget to pay their bill and eventually their policy gets canceled for non-payment. You need to know about that, right? You're going to want to know, because once that policy is canceled, you're now liable for their workers. So if you were a certificate holder, you'll get that notification from the insurance carrier that your sub is getting their policy canceled, and you'll be able to make the right decisions to avoid any potential liabilities. All right, so we're going to move out of that fun subject and get into another fun subject: costs, premiums, and penalties. So, what goes into a workers' compensation premium? Why do they cost so much money? And why does your workers' compensation cost different than someone else's workers' compensation insurance? So, workers' compensation premiums are determined primarily by classification code. That's the basis of your insurance premium. There's another organization called the Compensation Insurance Rating Board. They review and analyze all the insurance claims. They look at all the jobs, all the medical reports, all the insurance carrier filings, and they look to see, what is the likelihood that this type of worker and this type of occupation is going to have an accident or an injury, and how much does it usually cost? And that's how they figure out these classification codes. So naturally, the classification code for a more hazardous job is going to result in a higher premium base than a classification code for a less dangerous job. Other factors that go into the premium is the size of your payroll. Premiums are a percentage of payroll. So if you have more workers, your premium is going to be higher. Less workers, less premium. Safety is another big factor. Every business has an experience modifier on their insurance policy. That's just like with your car insurance or your homeowner's insurance. If you crash your car a whole bunch of times and you keep filing claims with your car insurance premium is going up. Same thing with your workers' compensation insurance. The more accidents and injuries have, the more workers' compensation claims get filed by your workers, the more your rates are going to go up because your experience modifier is going to be adjusted. So that's a huge part of your premium. Finally, the audit every year. Every year, everybody who has a workers' compensation policy has to go through a premium audit, payroll audit. They're going to ask you about your payroll. Your insurance carriers don't need to know every single time you add and subtract workers. They just want to know at the beginning of the year how many people you have, and then you true it up at the end of the year. So you start the year, you say you had 10 employees, business booms through the year, you start adding. By the end of the year, you have 20 employees. You don't have to tell them every time you add somebody, but at the end of the year, when you go through that premium audit, you can show them, look, I added these workers. They're going to look back, see how many hours you added them for, how much they worked for, and they will adjust your premium and ask you for more money. The reverse is also true, though, if you let workers go. If you have fewer workers at the end of the year than you started with and you submit your documentation to your payroll audit, then they're going to come back and say, wow, you actually had less risk than we thought. So we're going to give you a credit because you had less workers now. So that's a big part of it. And then finally, the last thing, and this is what really drives the differences from one insurance carrier to the other, is the administrative expenses. Because the workers' compensation rates are highly regulated, you're not going to see huge variations from one insurance carrier to the other, except in the administrative expenses. And this is where I'm also going to say your relationship with your insurance carrier or whoever you're using to buy your insurance is going to be very important in your decision-making process because the costs are not going to change that much from carrier to carrier. So really think about how you like to be treated as a business and what kind of relationship you have with the professionals you work with. This is our assessment rate. Just for transparency, the Workers' Compensation Board does not take any money out of the general tax fund for the rest of the state. We are funded entirely as a percentage of your workers' compensation premiums. We've been consistently trying to push it down year after year because we know premiums have been going up. Our assessment rate for 2026 is 7%. That's a 0.1% decrease from last year. So it's a little bit, but I'm going to throw in there that prior to this, we actually knocked the rate down by over 2%, which we estimate that's what that last bullet is. I have to clarify this a little bit. We estimate that we left $191 million out there in the amongst you, the businesses, by reducing that assessment rate last year. We weren't able to get a whole 2% down this year, but we did knock it down another tenth of a percentage point. So we're trying. We're trying our best here. Let's talk about disability and paid family leave costs. All right, much less than the workers' compensation insurance. Disability insurance, and if you recall earlier, the benefits that get paid out by the disability insurance are not very large. So the cost of disability insurance is not very high. It's not regulated by the state, so insurance carriers can charge whatever they want for disability insurance. It's a percentage of the payroll. I will say the rates that I've been hearing over the last few years in my conversation with businesses, 15 cents, 16 cents per $100 of payroll. You can take part of that from the workers. You can take half of 1% of wages, but no more than 60 cents a week. You pay the rest, right? So you can take a some contribution from your workers, but then you would pay the rest. Paid family leave is set in stone by the New York State Department of Financial Services. They set the rate each year, and as I mentioned previously, this year's rate is 0.432% of gross wages, capped at an annual maximum of $411.91, and you take the full contribution from the employee unless you want to pay for it for them. I should put that out there. If you want to pay for this for them, you could definitely do that. Now, the other costs, right? The other kinds of costs involved with the workers' compensation. So penalties, and I'll be perfectly honest, this is the number one reason people call my office. Right? We get dozens of phone calls all the time, every week, from workers who got non-compliance penalties. And they're very big. $2,000 for every 10 days out of compliance. That's pretty large. You stay out of compliance for a whole year, you're looking at a starting penalty of $72,000 a year, plus additional penalties, right? If it's just a misdemeanor, it's up to $5,000 on top of that. If you have more than 5 employees, now you're looking at a Class C felony, which can add an additional $50,000 on that penalty. And I haven't actually seen anybody go to jail for not having workers' compensation insurance. It's in there. It's in the law. You can go to jail for not having workers' compensation insurance. So don't let that happen to you. Right? Don't let any of these things happen to you. It's bad. These penalties are not fun. Misclassification is the same as being uninsured. What do I mean by that? Right, so I mentioned the classification codes earlier. Right, that's the base for your workers' comp premium. Right, sometimes you might try to lie. Like, let's say you have a roofing company and you want to lie and say all your roofers are not really roofers. They're secretaries. They're typists in an office because that's less dangerous. So you're trying to get a lower rate. If you get caught doing that, the penalty is going to be the same as if you had no insurance at all. So make sure that you are being very honest with your insurance carriers about the type of work that you do and your people do so that you get classified correctly. Penalties for the disability and the paid family leave are not nearly as large as the workers' compensation penalties, but any penalty is still something you want to avoid. So the penalties are half of 1% of payroll during the period of noncompliance, with a misdemeanor fine of additional $100 to $500. And yes, it is also written into the law that you can go to jail for not having disability and paid family leave insurance. I've never seen it happen, but it is in the law. With the disability and paid family leave, the fines will increase with each additional violation. So, try not to let it happen once, but definitely don't let it happen more than once, because the fine is going to be bigger every single time it happens. And then one consequence that really stinks for business owners, that affects anybody that gets a workers' comp penalty or disability and paid family leave penalty, is debarment. All right, if you get penalized for not having coverage for your workers, you are automatically put on the debarment list, New York State debarment list. Minimum of 1 year if you have a misdemeanor. If you have more than 5 employees and you fall into that felony bucket, you could be looking at up to 5 years on the debarment list. Not fun. If you're on the debarment list, you cannot bid on or be awarded any public work contracts. That's at the local and state level of government. So town work, village work, county work, or state work, you're barred from it. You can't get any permits approved, right? You can't compete for any grants. If you're a not-for-profit and you're looking for grants, you're not going to be able to bid on them or compete for them because you're debarred. So don't let debarment happen to you. There's no way off the debarment list unless you could prove to us that it was a mistake and you were on there by a mistake. We can get you off the list. There is a small exception if you only have a disability penalty, right? I'll put that out there. If you only have a disability penalty and the lapse is for less than 6 months, and it's your first time offense, we might be able to get you off the list. There is a small exception window for that only, but never for the workers' compensation insurance. But either way, I'm going to urge you to please call us no matter whether you think the penalty is appropriate or not. If you think the penalty is a mistake, we will get it rescinded. If you could prove it was a mistake, and you could prove you didn't have any payroll during the period of time that we're saying you did and should have had coverage, then we'll get the penalty rescinded. If the penalty is rescinded, you will automatically come off the debarment list. But even if it's not a mistake, even if you legitimately got the penalty, you really messed up, you forgot to get the insurance, or you thought you could get away with not getting the insurance, but we caught you. If you go out and get the insurance that you're supposed to have and then come to us and say, look, I'm sorry, I got this penalty, but look, I got all the insurance now. I'm in compliance with the law. I'm good to go. We will offer you a settlement. We offer every business a settlement if they ask for it, because we are not in the business of penalizing businesses. We're trying to get you to comply with the law and make sure you protect your workers and get them access to all the rights that they're entitled to under the law here in New York State. So regardless of whatever the situation is, if you get a letter from the Workers' Compensation Board that says we think you might have a problem or you have a penalty or anything like that, you need to contact us right away, because whatever your situation is, we're going to find a way to make it some way better. We can help. I guarantee we can help. So, I'm going to move away from that. I do see that somebody is asking me a question about finding out about injuries. I'm going to cover that. So just hang in there. Um, that's you see to put that question in there. I am going to answer that when we get to it. I'm going to do the last section. So let me run through these costs, controlling costs really quick, and then I will definitely talk about what to do when there is an accident or an injury. Cost control classification codes. I just said you can be penalized if you try to say that your workers are doing safer work than they're really doing. But the other side of that is if your insurance carrier makes a mistake and puts the wrong classification code down and classifies your workers as if they're doing more dangerous work than they're really doing, now you're actually overpaying for insurance and you don't want to do that. So stay on top of your insurance. Make sure your carrier does the right thing and has those codes classified correctly. If you do have a claim, follow the claim, stay informed, be a good customer to your insurance carrier, right? They ask you for stuff, give it to them. This also applies to those premium audits, the payroll audits that I mentioned earlier. Be responsive, be helpful, be cooperative, and you will have a better relationship with your insurance carrier and likely avoid increased costs. Finally, that last bullet down there, operate safely. Safety is so important, right? And just like how I mentioned, your premium is going to go up if you have more claims, right? Just like with the car insurance, more car accidents, higher car insurance. more workplace accidents, higher workers' comp. If you can operate safely and avoid accidents and injuries in your workplace and not have to file claims, your premium is going to stay down because your experience modifier is going to be good. So, some suggestions that we have as to how to keep safety a priority in your workplace. Create a labor management safety committee. We love this suggestion, right? If you're a larger organization, you could do this very formally. Have members of management and labor assigned to your committee and regularly meet and have an agenda and talk about different safety activities. Walk the workplace, look at the equipment, discuss procedures on a regular basis. But some people, that's a little more formal, especially if you're a small company and you only have a handful of employees. But I can still say you could still really achieve the benefits of this by just embracing the spirit of what we're talking about here. Create a culture in your workplace where your workers are comfortable talking about safety issues, that they would tell you if they see something dangerous or if a piece of equipment is not behaving the way it's supposed to and is making them nervous. Right? People need to tell you these things. You're not always going to know that there's a slippery step that could probably benefit from having some tacky tape put down or something like that. Some fixes are very easy, but you need people to be talking about it. So create this culture, create this labor management safety committee if you can, but create a culture in your workplace where safety and health is something people talk about. There's another resource available here at the New York State Department of Labor, an on-site consultation program. This program is fantastic. It's free and confidential, right? And because it's voluntary, there are no penalties or fines that get issued from this. But what we have is we have OSHA trained staff at the Department of Labor who will come and visit your workplace and do a hazard assessment and give you suggestions on how to mitigate any safety risks. They can do everything. They have all the tools. They can do air and noise sampling. They can do site hazard assessments. I'm pretty sure they can even take blood samples from your workers and have them checked in a lab if you think there's been some kind of chemical exposure or something like that. So this is a great program. It's free, it's confidential. I'm not kidding. There are no penalties or fines. This program is here just to help you protect your workers. So take advantage of it. 518-457-2238, New York State Department of Labor on-site consultation program. Another program administered by our friends over the Department of Labor is this Workplace Safety and Loss Prevention Incentive Program. It's also known as Code Rule 60. So this is like a voluntary program that's set up where if you can create and implement one, two, or three of those types of plans described there, a safety plan, return to work plan, drug and alcohol prevention plan, you must, according to the law, get a discount on your workers' compensation premium. Right? So you have to do this voluntarily. You have to jump in and say you're going to do this. But the savings the first year can be 10% and then 6% the second and the third years, and then you re-up it again year four. But so how does this work? You have a list of certified specialists on the Department of Labor website. You're going to need one of these specialists who is certified to sign off on the plan for you to get the discount credit. So the specialists on Department of Labor's website, you're gonna have to go out and reach out to them and contact them. They don't work for us. They're private contractors in most cases. You will have to pay them a fee for the sign off on the plan. If you create the plan yourself and they just review it and sign off on it, it's going to be cheaper, but you can also hire them to create the whole plan for you and pay them additional money. I'm not, there is a little bit of cost and effort involved in your part to get that discount. So you need to think about that. But I do want to put out there that many of the insurance carriers in New York State have certified specialists on their staff. They have risk control units or risk management units. They have resources available too because the insurance carriers, they don't want you to have accidents or injuries either. They don't make any money if they have to pay out claims to your workers. So ask them if they can help you. Ask your insurance carrier, do you have anybody that can help me with Code Rule 60? If they don't have somebody that can help you with Code Rule 60, ask them to have any other programs of their own that can help you get a discount. They're not going to do anything for you if you don't ask. So ask, start those conversations, see what's out there. But if you're interested in this specific program, you can go to the Department of Labor's website, see the list of specialists. There's some sample programs there that you can check out. So as I said, if you want to make the program yourself and then only have the specialist sign off on it, you could do that. The resources are there. Check it out. This is a great program, great people working over there. Definitely worth checking out. I'm going to take a minute here to talk about return to work because I did mention return to work plan. Most people understand safety plans, they understand drug and alcohol prevention plans, but what's a return to work plan? Return to work plan is planning how to get someone back into the office after or the workplace after they've been out with an injury, right? If you think about these things ahead of time, before the person gets hurt or sick, you'll be in a good position to really pivot to, okay, this is our return to work plan. We've got somebody who's injured. They can't do their job the way they used to, but we can get them to do this. And why is it in your best interest as a business to do that, to create these plans? Well, there's a lot of research out there that shows that people who stay out of work too long, they don't come back, right? It's very hard to return to coming back. And people who stay out of work for a really long time, like people who've been out of work for 2 years or more, there's only a 1% chance that they're ever going to come back. That's really bad. People fall into depression, they fall into despair, they're unhappy, they're miserable. It's not a place to be. They want to be productive. They want a place to go. So you create these plans. What can they do? How can they get back into the workplace? Maybe you've got some light duty assignments that you can consider for these people, or part-time work, or telephone calls to make, or something. But if you think about it and plan for it in advance, you'll be ready when the time comes. Some people get a little bit nervous about this because they're afraid that if the worker comes back to work part-time on a limited basis, that they're going to lose all their benefits, that they won't get the medical care. The insurance carriers and us here at the board, we can work with you to make this as painless as possible, right? We want to get people back in, but we also want to make them whole and take care of them. So you can work together with the insurance carrier so that the worker gets a reduced earnings benefit. So let's say they're out on a workers' comp claim. They're out there getting their indemnity, their wage replacement, but then you have some light duty they come back to at a lower, you would pay less for that, or maybe it's only part-time hours, lower salary. They'll end up splitting the difference. They'll reduce the workers' compensation claim benefit by the amount that the person is back at work. So that way you're not like duplicating payments to them, but they get both benefits. They get the full suite of benefits, the indemnity, the wage replacement, the medical care, but also the coming back into work and getting some pay there as well. The medical care part of it, people are afraid, well, what if I come back to work? I'm not going to be able to go to the doctor. Medical care for your work-related accidents or injuries is a lifetime benefit. Even after somebody comes back to work, if they had a knee injury and they come back to work and then the knee starts acting up and they need to go to the doctor for the knee again, if that knee is still covered as long as it's related to the same injury, you can keep going back even if you went back to work. So that's return to work. Very important. We want to see people come back in. So now I'm going to get into what to do if there's an injury, which is Yesenia's question there. So here's what happens. Somebody gets hurt or gets sick on the job. The first thing to do, obviously, is take care of them. Get the medical treatment right away, right? We're talking about human beings, their health and safety. Take care of them. But as a business owner, though, you got to start with the, covering your behind. So you're going to document everything. You should be documenting everything all the time, right? If you haven't learned that lesson as a business owner, I'm going to tell it to you now. You should be documenting as much as you can about as many things as you can all the time. But when it comes to your workplace accidents and injuries, you're definitely going to have the what, the where, the when, the how, the what tasks are they doing, where were they when it happened, were there any other witnesses, everything that you have, because you're going to need all that information to give to the insurance carrier to make sure, number one, if it's a legitimate claim, they get taken care of properly. But number two, if it's not a legitimate claim, that they don't get the benefit. But so once this has happened, the worker, they file the workers' compensation claim, the C3, with us at the Workers' Compensation Board. That's their responsibility, the injured worker. You, the business owner, your job is to tell the insurance carrier. That's your job. So you make sure you tell the insurance carrier because you're required to tell them once you know. When do you want to do this? When should the worker file a claim? If an accident or an injury requires multiple treatments of first aid, right? So, like if you could just throw a band-aid on it or wrap it up and the worker goes back to work, or they can leave and go to the doctor and the doctor can handle it really quickly and they come back the next day, there's probably no real reason for a claim. But if you have to keep returning to the accident or injury throughout the day and applying additional treatments more than once, or the person is going to miss many days of work, that's when a workers' compensation claim really needs to be filed, because they're going to need the medical, and they're going to need that wage replacement because they're going to be out of work. So again, the worker files the claim. You just tell your insurance carrier. We will tell the insurance carrier usually when we get a claim, but trust me, going back to what I said about having a good relationship with your insurance carrier, they would like to hear it from you first before they hear it from us. The worker is supposed to notify you as the employer in writing no later than 30 days after the incident. But I will warn you, your workers will sometimes file claims, employee claims, Form C3s, and not tell you. So this is, again, make sure you have a relationship with your workers. Make sure you're talking to them about health and safety. Make sure that you have the relationship. They would actually let you know when they're going to file a claim, so that it's not a surprise to you and the insurance carrier. Now, can you challenge the claim? Yes, of course you can challenge a claim. Your insurance carrier may often challenge the claim for you without you even asking. But if you think the accident didn't happen at work, or you didn't employ the worker, you've never heard of them before, I don't know this person, or for any other reason you think it's fraudulent, you can challenge a claim and ask your employer to challenge a claim. And this is where your documentation is going to be so important, because as I said earlier, every one of these claims is eventually going to be seen by a judge, and the judge is going to make a decision. So your ability to make your case based on the documentation you have is going to help you get to the outcome that you want. One thing to remember is we see this all the time, and it's a good thing, right? Employers will pay their workers continued wages while they're out. Like, so they get hurt, they start missing time, they file their workers' compensation claim, but the claim is not going to happen right away. I'll be honest, we're New York State government, we don't move that fast. So sometimes there's a period of time where the worker is waiting for their claim to be heard and to find out if they have an award. You, being a good employer, and you give your workers paid time off, sick time, vacation time, you allow them to keep using that time, and you're paying them. But once they get the claim award, they are going to get a benefit that goes all the way back to the date of the injury. If you want to make sure they don't get paid twice, you want to be reimbursed for the money that you paid out for the vacation and or the sick time. You have to ask for it before the award, before the claim goes in front of the judge, which really means you got to ask for it right away. As soon as you know there's a claim, if you know that you're paying out paid time off, vacation, sick time, you need to tell your insurance carrier right away and tell us. We have a form that you can file with us here at the board. Your insurance carrier should help you, but if they don't, contact me at the Advocate for Business office. You'll fill out this form and request that reimbursement, so that once there's a claim paid, award made, and money's going to go to the worker, you will be reimbursed for that money that you paid out. If you don't make the request before the award, it's too late, right? Then they end up with they keep both. They got to keep the money that you paid them for the paid time off. I mean, you don't have to, I mean, they lose the time, they burn the time, but they keep that money, and they also get the workers' compensation benefit. So another thing to really consider is now what we're talking about when the worker goes out, and they come back. Make sure you tell the insurance carrier once they're back, right? Because they're going to keep paying them. They don't know that the worker came back to work until you tell them. So they're going to keep sending them the indemnity checks, the wage replacement checks. So once that worker comes back to work and comes back to their job at their previous wage and their previous duties, you need to tell the insurance carrier right away so that they stop paying the benefit, right? So I know that so right away, again, claim goes in right away. When they come back, same thing. Let the carrier know right away. So just like we want to get things started right away, we want to end things as quickly as possible too. So make sure the carrier knows that the worker is back to work. Again, if you worked out one of those deals with the reduced earnings, the return to work, maybe the light duty, the partial duty, that's fine. It's only when they return to the original job at the original wage that then they no longer get any benefits at all. If they do return to work and nobody tells the insurance carrier and they pay out the money, they could face fraud charges. They're going to try to claw that money back. That's not a pleasant experience. So again, make sure the carrier knows right away once the worker comes back. Some people get nervous about coming back to work. I said this already, I'm going to say it again. Some people get nervous about coming back to work because they're afraid it is going to make it impossible for them to go to the doctor again. But that's not true. Medically necessary treatment for a work-related injury or illness is a lifetime benefit. All right, so that's the meat and the potatoes of this presentation. With 1 minute left to go, I'm going to do this little wrap up here. And like I said, I'm going to hang out and answer questions as long as people need it. Employer responsibilities, get the insurance that you're supposed to have. All right, I didn't say this before, but I'm going to say it now. You're going to get a poster or some kind of documentation with your insurance policy that says who it's with and what you have. You're going to put those posters up. If you don't have a physical place of business, you need to put some kind of digital package together and send it out to your workers. But they all need to know. Everybody who works for you needs to know that you have insurance and who that insurance is with, so they know where to go when they need to file a claim. Report the claims timely, right? Be a good customer to your insurance carrier, be a good partner, and you cannot discriminate against workers for filing a claim. It is their right. Now, I can say that just because somebody filed a claim, that doesn't mean that you have to keep a bad employee. Again, going back to the record keeping, if you've been documenting issues of misconduct, insubordination, or even economic reasons, slow down, sales are bad, you've got no business coming in, you can terminate a worker for any of those reasons. Poor job performance, long absences. It just can't be because of the claim, right? It can't be because of the claim. I'm going to say once again, employees are eligible for all three types of coverage: the disability, the paid family leave, as well as the workers' comp, regardless of citizenship or immigration status here in New York. Moving completely in a whole different direction here, I'm going to mention 9/11. We are still trying to reach people who were in Lower Manhattan responding to the 9/11 disaster. There are people who are still struggling with health conditions, and we have assistance available for them. So if you know anybody that was there responding to 9/11 and is still struggling or suffering from some health conditions, you need to send them to this website or send them to me so I could take them to this website and make sure they get the care that they're entitled to. On board, we are investing in a better board. That's really all I can say about this. Is we are trying to get better. We're improving our business processes, including a new business information system that those of you who are dealing with the board on a regular basis will see more and more of this come alive over the next couple of years. Follow us on social media: X, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. We've got quite a number of presentations just like this one on YouTube. Presentations on just paid family leave, presentations for workers on how to file a claim. Of course, nothing beats hearing the presentation live, but you can come check out any one of our presentations on our YouTube page. We also use LinkedIn. And if you don't like social media, but you still want to hear from us, you can sign up for notifications, wcb.my.gov. Go to our website, type into the search field, get WCB notifications, and that will take you to the page so you can sign up for our delivery blasts. We don't send out that much email. I promise. We are not going to fill up your inbox with spam, but we will give you helpful and important information regarding any policy changes or updates or legislation related to your workers' compensation, disability, or paid family leave. Finally, the most important slide in the whole presentation is my team's contact information. That is our telephone number up there, 518-486-3331, and our email address, advocatebusiness@wcb.my.gov. Real people will answer this telephone call. Real people will answer those emails and answer them quickly. You will get a pickup on that telephone call when you call us, and you should get a response to an email to us the same day, if not, worst case scenario, the next day. So please reach out to us. Let us know if you need anything. Very important contact information. I'm going to take questions now. Throw them in the chat if you have them. I really appreciate your feedback, and hopefully I can give you whatever information you need that I didn't cover already. While I do this, I am going to put up our QR code because I do have a very short survey. It's only 6 or 7 short questions. I'd really appreciate if anybody has a minute, can just hit that QR code and fill out that survey. And I will mute my microphone while I read through the questions here to see if there's anything that I can help anybody out with before we go. So stay tuned. I will be right back. So I have one question here about retroactive deductions for a paid family leave waiver. I hate to do this, but I'm going to punt this question to our paid family leave attorney of the day. So If you prefer, you can send me an email to the Advocate Business email address or call our telephone number and give us the question over the phone. Or what I'll do is I'll scroll back to the slide with the number for the paid family leave attorney of the day. And you can call them directly. This number right here, 844-337-6303, will get you one of our workers' compensation board attorneys who is an absolute expert on paid family leave and will be able to help you figure out whether or not you should or should not take those retroactive deductions that you're asking about. So, Jenny, that question is for you. Going to leave this up for about 5 more seconds, and then I'm going to go back to my QR code. And like I said, I'm happy to hang around here and answer questions. I don't have any more questions. No one else is throwing any more questions into the chat. That's cool. I guess I did a really good job. Like I said, I will hang out for maybe another 4 minutes. I'll stay till 10 after. So you have that much more time to throw any questions into the chat, and I'll try to answer them. Again, you can also, you have our contact information. Feel free to reach out to us with any questions or concerns. If you would like a copy of the PDF of these presentation slides, you can also send an email to us, and we will certainly send that out to you. Happy to do so. Hope you found this presentation to be valuable. And like I said, I'm going to hang out for another 4 minutes or so in case anybody has any last minute thoughts. And, oh, we do have another question here. Who do we have to cover for disability insurance? Are part-time employees required to be covered? Yes, you do need to have disability insurance for your part-time employees. It needs to be in place 4 weeks after the 30th day of employment. So it kind of follows the same pattern as what we mentioned with the paid family leave. If you only think the worker is going to be with you for a few weeks or just a few hours, you don't necessarily need to have it. But once they're going to be with you, or they're going to be with you on a full-time basis, and they're going to be with you 4 weeks after the 30th day of employment, that's when we're going to start looking. 4 weeks after the 30th day of employment. So you will need to get that disability insurance. Any other questions? All right, so a question about elected officials of a municipality. So with the disability and the paid family leave, there's a little bit of nuance with the government offices and the government agencies. Some of them are not required to have the disability and the paid family, or at least the paid family leave until recently. So the email address for questions that's coming up here, and I definitely would want to talk to you about the person who's asking about the elected officials of a municipality. Again, with elected officials, we're really going to want to look into, the work. Are they working? They're workers. They need to be covered. But we do have, I'm going to go back. I did have the slide here with our email address is advocatebusiness@wcb.my.gov. Right? Advocatebusiness@wcb.my.gov. Drop the survey link in the chat. How can I? Let me see if I can do that too. I think what I'm gonna have to do for you, Karen, is I'll send you a copy of the PDF, and then you can hit the survey from the PDF once you have it on your computer, because I don't know if I can pull a link out of the PowerPoint presentation. All right, so I'm going to call it right here. I'm going to log off for the day. That's our contact information. You have it. I appreciate anybody who did take the time to go and fill out our survey. I very much appreciate it. If you did send us an email and ask us for the presentation slides, we'll send them out to you, and look forward to your attendance at one of the next super awesome Workers' Compensation Board webinars. Have a great day. Enjoy the holidays, whatever you're celebrating. Make the most of it. Enjoy the next couple of weeks. Have the most fun you possibly can. And we'll be back for another webinar in January. Thank you all. Take care. Bye-bye.